When God heals you quietly, it exposes every lie they told. You didn't ruin their lives. You just kept going. And that was enough. Every pain you went through made you stronger, and your quiet healing became the sharp truth that cut through all their lies. Chosen one, take a moment to see what really happened. They tried to hide your voice with gossip. They covered your truth with lies. They thought you'd disappear, alone and forgotten. But while they laughed at your silence, thinking you were weak, God was writing your comeback quietly, carefully, and full of purpose. Now everything has changed. And it's not just karma, it's what happens when truth shows up. The people who once treated you like you didn't matter, they're crying behind closed doors. Not because you argued or called them out, but because you simply left. Here's the truth you didn't fight. You stepped away. You didn't scream. You healed. And your silence? It spoke louder than anything you could have said. Studies show that losing someone you took for granted hurts more deeply than failing at a personal goal. Why? Because we don't grieve truth while it's present. We grieve it once it walks away, fully and without apology. That's what they're feeling now. You didn't throw shade. You became the eclipse. You didn't beg to be valued. You let your absence reveal what your presence always carried. If you've ever chosen silence over revenge, type "I see it now" in the comments. And if you feel this message already, don't just listen, subscribe to the Chosen Bloom channel to keep rising. Share it for someone who might need it. And the cold they feel now? It's not the weather. It's your silence pressing through locked doors and pretending smiles. It's the reality they can't scroll away from. So, thank you, Chosen One. And if you feel this message in your bones, don't just watch, be part of the movement. Like, subscribe, help carry this light to those still in the dark. But understand, this is not about revenge. It's about realignment. This moment marks a spiritual shift so powerful, it cracked the foundation of every lie they told to dismiss your worth. For the first time, they're seeing clearly. And what they see isn't what they expected. You were never fragile. You were the thread that held everything together. And now that you've stepped away, the unraveling has begun. They created false narratives to protect their pride. She's too sensitive. He's too intense. They'll never actually leave. But you did. And now that you're gone, undisturbed, unapologetic, those stories have collapsed. In their place stands a mirror, and what it reflects isn't strength but regret. Because they didn't just lose you. They lost the version of themselves that only felt powerful when leaning on you. And though they'll never admit it publicly, the truth is loud behind closed doors. They'll post joy, pose laughter, mimic confidence. But they can't fake the feeling of a soul suddenly disconnected from real light. That emptiness they feel now, that's what your presence once held. And it's not coming back. But at night, it's a different story. When the world grows quiet and the distractions fade, silence becomes weight. The noise they once escaped through pride now echoes back as memory, and the ego they wore like armor begins to decay. Because you weren't just a moment in their life, you were the mirror of their potential, the embodiment of everything they were too afraid to pursue. And now that you've stopped absorbing their chaos, they're left face to face with the one person they've run from all along, themselves. And they hate what they see. That's why they're breaking. Not just because you're gone, but because your absence forced them to confront a truth they denied for too long. That maybe they weren't the hero of the story. Maybe they were the storm. This is how the universe reclaims its order, not with shouting, not with revenge, but with silence, with removal. It takes the chosen one out of the equation and lets the absence tell the truth they refuse to hear. You were the calm they could not create, the stillness they could not understand, the reflection they refused to accept. And now that the mirror is gone, so is the illusion. The unraveling has begun. This isn't sadness. It's collapse. This isn't guilt. It's exposure. They're not just regretting, they're crumbling under the weight of consequences they never thought would find them. And you, chosen one, must not doubt your role in this. Do not apologize for walking away. Do not question the timing. What you're witnessing isn't random, it's divine accountability. This is not revenge. It's correction. The universe is restoring balance. They thought your exit would be the end, but your absence became the beginning of their reckoning. The same doors they slammed in your face are now closing on their own hand. The same silence they used to control you is now the silence that suffocates them. Chosen one, your glow-up wasn't just visible, it was seismic. It shattered the illusion of their control and exposed the truth behind their performance. And now, they sit in rooms filled with noise, but haunted by your quiet. The tears they cry aren't for what they did. They're for what they see now and for who they'll never be again without you. The tears they shed now aren't for what they did, they're for what they lost and can never reclaim. And you, chosen one, must understand, this isn't the end of their reckoning. It's only the beginning. The exposure has just started. So, the real question is, are you ready to see the full truth behind the breakdowns they're hiding behind their polished facade? Because what comes next will not only confirm the weight of your presence, but explain exactly why they're losing sleep while pretending all is well. If you've ever walked away silently and felt the ground shake beneath the feet of those who underestimated you, drop it 777 in the comments. And if this message has already stirred something deep within you, consider fueling this mission tab that's super thanked. Every like, every share, every gift, big or small, is a ripple that reaches another chosen one still questioning their worth. Whether it's $1 or a whispered prayer, it matters. Because you're not just here to listen. You're a living part of a divine disruption they never saw coming. So stay with me. Don't click away. This isn't just content, it's confirmation. And what comes next goes deeper. If you've made it to this point, something inside you already knows this found you for a reason. The timing wasn't random. The message was sent. Now let's unpack the truth step by step. Trust me, if you are who you think you are, you'll feel the pull to stay through every last word. If you're still with me, this next part goes deeper. Stay till the end. It's no longer just a message. It's personal confirmation. Let's begin. Number 1, they built a funeral, but you came back as fire. And now, they're burning in the ashes of the stories they set to destroy you. Because here's the irony, the dead don't haunt the living. It's the living who are haunted by the truth they tried to bury. And that truth is you. Your survival wasn't part of the script they rehearsed behind your back. And now, their minds can't rest. Their breath is shallow. Their reality is fractured. Why? Because the outcome they bet on never arrived. Now pause and picture it. At your lowest moment, they didn't stand in concern, they circled like vultures, hungry to consume and control the narrative. They didn't want to understand you. They wanted to define you. They whispered about your mental state, twisted your stillness into weakness, mocked your quiet as if it were defeat. But it wasn't. And they didn't just want to see you fall, they wanted to orchestrate your downfall and watch the collapse with a front row seat. They needed your downfall. It wasn't just entertainment, it was validation. As long as you stayed broken, their lies held weight. As long as you stayed small, their narratives stood unchallenged. But then you did the one thing their egos couldn't prepare for you, survive. And that single fact unraveled every story they ever told. Suddenly, their fiction couldn't hold under the weight of your truth. And here's where it gets even deeper. Psychologists say that when someone has invested in a false version of reality, especially one built to manipulate others, watching it collapse can trigger the same emotional reaction as a traumatic loss. That's what they're experiencing now. Not grief for you. Grief for the control they lost when the image they created of you shattered beyond repair. They're not crying because they miss the real you. They're crying because the version of you they fabricated, the one they could mock, manage, and manipulate, is dead. Gone, never returning. You didn't just outlive the smear campaign, you buried it. Without drama, without defense. Your silence became the gravestone of every lie, and your presence, undeniable and evolved, became the proof they never wanted to face. While they were performing for the crowd, you were rebuilding in quiet. While they were spinning stories, you were collecting wisdom in the dark. And now that you've returned stronger, clearer, and colder, they don't speak the same. Their tongues are heavy, because deep down, they know one wrong word, one whispered accusation, and they'll choke on the lies they used to say so easily. They thought your silence was surrender. But it wasn't disappearance, it was metamorphosis. In private, you upgraded. You polished your spirit. You restored your mind. You rewired your energy. And when you re-emerged, you didn't shout. You didn't expose. You didn't post cryptic messages or drop receipts. You simply existed. And that your presence, your peace, your glow was louder than any clapback could ever be. Now they walk into rooms where your name once brought laughter and feel a pressure they can't explain. That's not guilt. It's consequence. The same people they gossiped with now glance at you in awe, whispering to themselves, "Wait, this is the one they said was unstable." And in that moment, they realized the lie didn't just die, it buried their credibility with it. You've become their contradiction, the living proof that every lie they told is now exposed. And that's what makes this unbearable. When a chosen one rises, after being dragged unjustly through the dirt, there's no defense left for those who tried to bury them. You didn't claw your way back with vengeance. You returned with stillness, with poise, with a presence so grounded it rattles their spirit every time your name is spoken. Because now, to acknowledge the new you, they'd have to admit what they did to the old you. And that's a truth they're not brave enough to say out loud. They cornered themselves with their own script. They cast you as the villain, forgetting that the author of your story had other plans. And now every blessing that appears in your life reads like a plot twist they never saw coming. You weren't supposed to rise. You weren't supposed to smile again. You weren't supposed to glow. But here you are, more than okay. Thriving, radiant, scarred, but shining, every wound transformed into light. You move through life like peace is your revenge. And the most powerful part? You never needed to clap back. They misunderstood your silence as surrender, never realizing that silence is the language of storms right before they break. Now, every step you take forward is one they can't block. They're frozen in the wake of your ascension, forced to watch your elevation in real time, knowing that every lie, every betrayal, every attempt to break you only fueled the rise they swore would never happen. It's poetic justice, and it's unraveling them from the inside out. They bet against you, waiting for collapse. But you didn't fall, you became the collapse. Not of yourself, but of every illusion they built to cover their guilt. No. They cry behind closed doors, calling it stress or allergies, when really, it's the weight of your existence pressing on the lies they still can't admit. You didn't return to retaliate. You returned to reclaim your name, your peace, your power. your truth. So let them whisper, let them spin, let them drown in the noise they created while you drink from the still waters of your healing. Because now, the truth is visible and they can't unsee it. You were never the villain. You were the erased, the dismissed, the overlooked. But you came back as the mirror, and nothing terrifies a liar more than a walking truth they can no longer silence. Let that settle. Let it burn. Let it free you. They thought they wrote your ending, thought their version of the story would be the one that stuck. But the truth is, the pen was never in their hands. While they were busy narrating your downfall for anyone who would listen, you were quietly building legacy out of rubble. So go ahead, chosen one, keep shining without saying a word. Because now, every smile you wear echoes back at them as proof of their failure. Every success you step into, every healed wound, every night you sleep in peace, it lands like a silent strike to their soul. And the most powerful part? You didn't lift a finger. You didn't have to fight. You just lived. And now, they can't. Number 2, they thought your glow was a filter, easy to copy, easy to fake. But now, they're beginning to see it for what it truly is, fuel from a divine source they'll never access. A glow earned in darkness can't be dimmed by spotlight. And while they sit in rooms drenched in artificial energy, clinging to temporary attention, they're forced to watch you radiate from a fire they could never survive. They thought your light came from the surface, your look, your walk, your social media, your presence. They thought it was about style, popularity, aesthetics. They tried to reduce your radiance to a trend. But what they didn't realize was that they weren't seeing image, they were witnessing aftermath. They saw the beauty, but missed the ashes. They admired the light, but never asked about the flame. This glow wasn't handed to you. It was fought for, bled for, prayed through. It didn't come from the outside in. It was forged from the inside out. And that is what unsettles them. Because now they realize, no matter how many screenshots they take, how closely they mimic your words, your clothes, your energy, it never hits the same. It never will. Because your light doesn't come from imitation. It comes from initiation. They can wear your style, but they can't wear your scars. They can copy your image, but not your anointing. Because your glow is cosmic, not cosmetic. And that makes it untouchable. A glow born through survival, through transformation, through spiritual refinement can't be faked with filters or borrowed confidence. And deep down, they know it. That's what eats at them. That's what keeps them watching, obsessing, unraveling. Because the light they see on you is not something they can explain, it's something they feel. And that frequency, it's truth. It's divine. It's earned. It's vibration. It's frequency. It's energy earned, not borrowed. Energy forged by walking through hell with your head held high. They pushed you into silence, left you buried in shadows, labeled you forgettable. But instead of collapsing, you constructed. While they ignored your pain, you listened to the universe. While no one applauded, you healed. You bled in private, rose in secret, and grew in the dark until your stillness became presence and your wounds began to shine. They once called you strange, too sensitive, too intense, too deep. They mocked your silence and misunderstood your solitude. But now, those same voices grow quiet when you enter the room. The energy shifts. The air changes. Conversations pause when your name is mentioned, not out of gossip, but reverence. Because the very traits they used to reject are now the qualities the world leans into. They thought you were invisible. Now you're undeniable. Real power doesn't scream. It doesn't beg to be seen. It radiates. And your presence refined in silence rattles those who believed volume was strength. Now they're restless, confused, obsessed. They whisper questions in private. What happened? How did they get this magnetic? Why can't I draw people in like that? But the answer is simpler than they want to admit. You earned it. You didn't chase a moment. You built momentum. It wasn't performance. It was transformation. Every breakdown, every betrayal, every night you sat alone and chose growth over bitterness, those were the bricks. And now the foundation is unshakable. And as they watch your rise, panic begins to set in. Because they finally realize something devastating. Your glow never needed them. It never depended on their approval, their presence, or their validation. They weren't the spark. They were the static background noise to a frequency they were never tuned into. And now, that realization is hitting them like soul-level rejection because they see it clearly. Now you've become the light that exposes everything they tried to hide. Your existence makes their shadows visible, and that's why they fear you. Not because you're loud, but because you don't need to be. They wanted to outshine you, but now they know the truth. You were never even in the same arena. You're not chasing their spotlight. You're operating in an entirely different galaxy. Your presence isn't just something people see, it's something they feel. It's not visual, it's spiritual. Your energy doesn't just attract, it activates. It wakes up what's been asleep in others. Imagine this: they walk into a space thinking they're in control, certain of their presence. But the moment you arrive, the atmosphere shifts. People listen more, feel more, trust more. And the part that unsettles them most? You're not even trying. You're not performing. You're just being. That's what makes you unforgettable. That's what makes you powerful. They're starting to see the truth. Your glow isn't edited. It's not filtered. It wasn't borrowed. It wasn't bought. Because what you carry isn't trend, it's transformation. It's the light of someone who healed in silence, grew through pain, and rose from wounds that never received an apology. And that kind of light? It's not cute. It's not for show. It's sacred. It's alignment, divine timing wrapped in human form. You don't walk in like you own the room. You walk in like you own yourself. And that alone changes the entire frequency. Because your glow is made of truth. Every unspoken no, every tear that became wisdom, every rejection that became redirection. They tried to bury you, remember? But you weren't finished, you were planted. They mistook your stillness for an ending, not knowing your roots were expanding, your depth deepening, your power multiplying. And now, they want a taste of it. They want to know the secret, your rituals, your mindset, your routine. They think they can replicate the results without enduring the process. But what they don't understand is that your glow was forged in fire. And fire doesn't just reveal, it refines. They want your radiance, but don't have the stamina to survive your storms. So they cry behind closed doors, not because you're loud, but because you're real. Because every time they try to outshine you, they only highlight how much they're trying. And trying will never outshine truth. You don't have to chase approval. You are living proof that energy never lies. People feel it before you speak. They sense it before you move. And now even the ones who laughed are quiet. Because the one they dismissed has become the one they can't stop watching. They chased applause. You pursued alignment. They wanted the crowd. You sought healing. They curated image. You cultivated impact. And that's the difference. That's why your light doesn't just shine, it pierces. Let them cry. Let them compare. Let them chase every trend they can find while you continue to grow in silence. Because here's the truth, chosen one. Your glow isn't up for sale. It was never made for validation. It was born from liberation. It wasn't built in front of cameras. It was born in quiet battles nobody saw. So every time they try to compete with a light the universe gave you freely, without marketing, without filters, without force, they lose. Every time. So hold your head high. Keep glowing without explanation. Because they finally understand you were never meant to blend in. You were born to blind the counterfeit with a truth they cannot duplicate. And here's the real flex. They're not crying because you won. They're crying because you never needed them to. Not then. Not now. Not ever. Number 3, they bet on your collapse, but you came back as fire. They weren't waiting to celebrate your victory. They were whispering, hoping, praying for your fall. And now, they're choking on the silence of your success. Imagine this, chosen one. You're climbing a mountain alone, bleeding, freezing. No cheers, no hands reaching out, just whispers behind your back. But they're not wondering if you'll make it. They're placing bets on where you'll fall. That's what they were doing while you were breaking. While you were holding yourself together in the dark, they were smirking in the light, turning your isolation into a story they hoped would validate their cruelty. But here's what they didn't account for. You weren't breaking down. You were breaking open into someone they can't study, decode, or manipulate. Because true transformation doesn't happen in applause. It happens in the dark, when no one is watching, when no one is cheering, when the only person who believes in you is you. And now they're crying behind closed doors for one reason. They mistook your silence for surrender. But it was never your ending. It was your entrance. While they refreshed their feeds, waiting for a collapse, you were crafting a comeback so quiet, so sacred, it didn't need an announcement. You didn't fall. You evolved. You didn't lose yourself. You located your essence. And now, when you walk into rooms, you don't need to speak. The peace you carry is louder than their noise, and it makes their chaos feel cheap. They thought your absence meant you had fallen. But it wasn't defeat, it was construction. While they gossiped and speculated, you were building spiritual muscle in dimensions they don't even have the emotional range to enter. They couldn't survive what you endured, those sleepless nights, those battles with your own shadows, those quiet prayers to the universe whispered through trembling breath. They couldn't carry the grace it took to forgive those who never said sorry, to love in silence, to heal in hiding. And now look at you. That glow on your face, that calm in your spirit, that survival without visible scars, that strength wrapped in softness. That's grace with grit. So let this settle in your soul. Let them watch for your downfall while you design your uprising. Because no matter how hard they try, they can't copy what you've become. Their energy has never touched the depths that shaped you. You weren't just tested. You were tempered, like steel heated, folded, hammered, until the weak parts burned away. What's left is unshakable, and while they're still repeating the same empty words they once used to tear you down, you're not even looking back. Because real breakthroughs don't ask for attention. They leave a shockwave. They thought you would break, but it was them who cracked the moment they saw you rise. The roles have reversed. Now they sit in silence, watching someone they swore was finished dominate with dignity, clarity, and peace they can't manufacture. Number 4, their conscience has finally awakened, and it came out swinging. Now it won't let them sleep. Because you can't outrun what you did to someone who was divinely assigned to survive your mistreatment. This isn't a gentle revelation. This isn't a soft nudge of remorse. This is a collision, a psychological breakdown that came like a truth bomb with no warning, no mercy, and no way to escape. Their ego was the first to collapse. because no amount of denial, distraction, or spiritual bypassing could protect them from what just hit. They thought they buried the guilt, thought time would dissolve it, thought moving on without accountability was power. But the universe doesn't forget. It simply waits. It stores every charge, and when alignment is right, it lights the fuse. And now, the fuse is burning. Their mind is crawling with the memories they tried to erase, moments they gaslit, boundaries they violated, conversations they twisted. Every lie, every manipulation, every cold silence they used as a weapon against your truth, it's all flooding back. And it's not subtle. It's loud. It's relentless. It's justice. Have you ever seen someone haunted by their own conscience? You'll recognize it in the way their mood shifts when your name is mentioned, the way they flinch in silence, the way they startle in rooms where they used to hold power. The body keeps score. And right now, their soul is paying every unpaid bill. Because regret doesn't knock politely. It kicks the door down. And the wildest part? You didn't even have to do a thing. You just healed. You just glowed. You just moved on. And that is what's undoing them. And that alone was enough to trigger a psychological landslide. Because the version of you they betrayed was never meant to vanish. It was meant to transform. And it did. Now, you've become the mirror. They can't escape the reflection that reveals everything they tried to avoid. Picture this. They sit in a room full of people, smiling, laughing, pretending all is well. But then a quiet thought enters. Soft at first, like a whisper sliding under the door. You were wrong. You hurt someone who actually had a good heart? That thought settles in the chest. It grows heavy. It keeps them up at night. And as sleep slips away, isolation sets in. And soon, silence becomes the loudest sound they know. Karma doesn't come with thunder. It comes with clarity. It doesn't strike with rage. It places a shattered mirror in your hands and says, look, make no mistake, this isn't a gentle wave of remorse. It's consequence, delivered in vivid color. Relationships begin to fracture. Friendships feel cold. Jobs feel shaky. Nothing feels aligned anymore. Because what they did to you is echoing now in every space they walk into. Doors begin to close. Joy slips through the cracks. Peace becomes a luxury they can't afford. Why? Because the universe is not punishing them. It is teaching them. And you were the lesson. The one they misjudged. The one they tried to diminish. Now, every day is a silent classroom. And their soul feels it. Their energy is weighed down by the residue of betrayal. And no filter is strong enough to cover that kind of exposure. You cannot rest peacefully in a bed made from deceit. They're not crying because you're glowing. They're crying because deep down, they know why they've been disconnected from their own light. The universe has stripped away their excuses, their masks, their illusions of superiority. And what's left? A raw truth. One they can no longer outrun. They wounded someone they were meant to protect. Now, when they look in the mirror, they no longer recognize the face staring back. Ever wonder why they went silent? Why they disappeared without explanation? Why they suddenly pulled back while watching you rise? It's not peace, it's judgment. The kind that comes from within. That awkward quiet is the courtroom of the soul, and they're standing trial. Not by you, but by conscience itself. So, if you've been asking, do they regret it? The answer is yes, but it goes beyond regret. It's a reckoning of the spirit. They don't just remember what they did. They feel it in their bones, in their breath, in the unsettling way life no longer feels quite right. And this is only the beginning, because the universe doesn't always reply with drama. Sometimes it lets people sit in the same silence they once rejoiced in when they watched you suffer. Only now, that silence is echoing with guilt. And that guilt? It never whispers. It roars in the dark. Number 5, they're crying not because you sought revenge, but because you didn't. You chose peace. And that's what undid them. Peace, chosen one, is the loudest form of vengeance you will ever serve, especially to those who expected you to stay broken. They thought they could predict your next move. They believed pain would turn you into a weapon, that betrayal would make you bitter, that your entire focus would be vengeance, making them feel exactly what they made you endure. But that's where their illusion shattered, because you didn't reach for revenge. You reached for peace, and that's the one outcome they never saw coming. You see, in their mind, they wrote a story, one where you were still stuck angry, wounded, waiting in the dark, with clenched fists and a thirst for justice. That fantasy gave them a false sense of power. It allowed them to believe they still occupied space in your mind, that they still had access to your energy. That belief it was the last blanket their ego had left. But now that blanket is gone, and they're left shivering in the cold reality that you let it all go. You didn't scream. You didn't demand closure. You didn't post cryptic quotes or throw digital stones. You didn't drag their name into the light. You simply disappeared. But not into darkness, you vanished into elevation. While they were preparing for war, you were preparing for your future. Because you don't dismantle your enemies by fighting them. You do it by starving them of your energy. And that's exactly what you did. You stopped reacting. You stopped explaining. You stopped bleeding for people who handed you the knife in the first place. And that's what broke their grip. Because when someone builds their identity on your suffering, your healing becomes their undoing. Their tears now aren't for missing you. They're for the loss of control. They never imagined you'd survive without their apology, without their version of closure. But you did something far more powerful than getting even. You moved on. You found peace in the middle of the ashes. You planted new roots in soil they once set on fire. And now the blooms in your life? That's your justice. That's your answer. Picture it. They came ready for battle, dressed in manipulation, flanked by gossip, rehearsing the drama. But instead of a fight, they were met with silence. Not weakness, but sovereign silence. The kind that speaks without saying a word. The kind that says, I don't live in that energy anymore. And that silence, it burns more than any reply ever could. Because here's the truth, you don't owe closure to the hands that tried to bury you alive. You stopped chasing explanations. You stopped needing their admission. And in that letting go, you found something far greater. You came to understand something they never did. Healing doesn't require their participation. And by the time they realized it, it was already too late. Because they were never the storm. You were. But unlike them, you never used your power to destroy. You used it to rebuild. You didn't rise for revenge. You rose for peace. They didn't just lose access to your presence. They lost access to the version of you that tolerated emotional warfare in the name of loyalty. That version, so patient, so forgiving, so willing to understand, is now buried. Buried under the weight of every silent night you cried while they laughed. Under every moment you stayed quiet while they sharpened their words. They lost the person they believed would always be there, the one who forgave without apology, the one who explained without being heard, the one who gave without being valued. But you didn't just walk away. You outgrew them. And nothing wounds the ego more deeply than realizing it's no longer needed. Not for love, not for closure, not even for validation. To someone addicted to your energy, your peace is poison. And now they're watching. watching your name be honored in spaces they said you'd never enter, watching your glow fill rooms they once tried to darken, watching people celebrate the same traits they used to mock and twist. And the beauty of it all? None of it required vengeance. Just peace. Just distance. Just the sacred refusal to participate in your own destruction. They're not weeping because they love you. They're weeping because they can no longer use you. Because your silence wasn't retreat, it was reclamation. It was your soul pulling its power back. The battlefield they prepared is quiet now. There is no war, no opponent. You left them to wrestle with the only enemy that ever truly mattered, their own reflection. So, if you've wondered whether your peace was loud enough, let this be your answer. Yes, it was. It is. It echoes through every quiet moment they now fear. It haunts the stillness they used to weaponize. It reminds them that they weren't the fire. You were. And now, while they drown in the noise of their own choices, you rise in silence, in stillness, in strength. No revenge, no anger, just peace. And that peace, it is the most violent grace they will ever witness. Number 6, you became the punishment they cannot escape without ever speaking a single "you didn't destroy them." You simply survived. And that was enough. You didn't need a courtroom. You didn't need an audience. You didn't need a confession. You didn't post your pain online. You didn't explain your healing. You didn't flash receipts. All you did was keep going. And that became their sentence. Because your continued presence, your glow, your breath, your peace is something they cannot handle. You are the quiet judgment they never expected. The silent consequence they never prepared for. And though they'll never admit it, something shifts inside them every time your name is spoken. It's not just guilt, it's exposure. Because your transformation reveals everything they tried to hide. Every lie they told to justify their mistreatment. Every excuse they made to sleep at night. Now, every room you walk into becomes a silent courtroom. And their soul is on trial without a judge, without a jury. They don't know why they're sweating, but they feel it. Because you are the mirror they cannot escape. And when people speak your name with admiration, it lands like a blow to their chest. Not because they hate you, but because they remember. They remember choosing pride over love. They remember playing games while you offered sincerity. They remember trying to break what they now wish they could still hold. You have become the embodiment of their regret. Not through revenge, not through pettiness, but through peace, through purpose, through truth. Your glow now reflects everything they are not. Your calm now reveals the storm still raging inside them. You've become a living reminder of what they mishandled, what they misjudged. They see your growth and feel their own stagnation. They hear your name and taste the bitterness of their own decisions. You're not a ghost, but still you haunt them. Why? Because your peace screams in a language no words ever could. You used to cry. You used to explain. You used to beg to be understood. You used to fight to be heard, to be seen, to be understood. But not anymore. Now, you simply exist, no apology, no closure, no response. And that silence? It cuts deeper than anything you could have ever said. Because silence isn't empty. It's filled with every truth they've tried to avoid. They can't tap into your energy anymore. And the absence of it? It's unraveling them from the inside out. You see, it was never just about hurting you. They needed you to remain accessible, needed your reactions, your explanations, your vulnerability. They needed you hooked to their chaos, but you disconnected. You became unavailable. And nothing punishes a manipulator more than losing control over the person they once fed off. Now, while you are building, breathing, becoming, they're stuck replaying the moment they lost you over and over again. And every time they fake a smile, scroll past your name, or hear someone mention your growth, they flinch. Because deep down, they know. They lost someone real, someone rare, someone who didn't need revenge because the universe took care of it. Every win you walk in, every breath of peace you carry, every layer of growth you now wear like armor, it all speaks one truth louder than words. You didn't need to get even. You became the reminder. You became the consequence. And no one is doing this to them. It's just you healed, whole, and moving forward. Number 7, they tried to curse you with their words, and now they can't stop saying your name. They thought their whispers could shape your future, that their venom, spoken in secret, could poison your purpose. They gathered in shadows, certain their gossip would burn bridges you hadn't even crossed. At first, they mocked you. They twisted your story. They gave you labels and laughed like the universe was in on their joke. But the only ones laughing now are silent. Because somewhere along the way, those curses returned to sender. And now, the same mouths that once tried to bury you are repeating your name more than ever. Not in peace, not in praise, but in panic. Because you didn't fall. You didn't break. You didn't vanish like they predicted. You rose. And now, they're stuck in the echo of their own words, haunted by the sound of the name they once tried to erase. Pause and reflect. Can you feel this truth? If so, comment 777 and let the world know you're walking in your healing now. They tried to stain your name, but the ink never held. Instead of sticking, it turned to fuel. The lies became fertilizer. The rumors? Soil for your roots. Every curse they spoke returned not to your spirit, but to their own stability. And now, every time they open their mouth, your name slips out. Not with power, but with confusion. How are you still rising? How are you still glowing? How is your name being honored in rooms they once tried to lock you out of? They never planned to build your legend, but that's exactly what they did. While they obsessed over your downfall, they accidentally manifested your rise. That's spiritual irony in its purest form. They believed their voice could destroy you. Instead, it immortalized you. And here's what they'll never say out loud. They're not inspired, they're exposed. Because now, their conscience can't rest. They try to move on, but you're everywhere. In the jokes that don't feel funny anymore. In the stories they can't stop retelling. In the blessings you keep collecting. Even in silence, your presence has grown louder. You may not be in their lives, but you live in their awareness, rent-free, permanent, undeniable. The curse didn't stick, but you did. And every time they try to bury your name, it echoes louder. Because you became something they never intended, legendary. Number 8, they realized too late that you were the blueprint, not the backup. They always saw you as temporary, a safety net, someone to lean on when things got unstable, someone to use and discard once balance returned. In their eyes, you were a stepping stone, a placeholder, a bridge they fully intended to cross and then burn without even looking back. But now, they stand in the ashes, finally understanding the truth. You were never the extra, never the option, never the side route. You were the foundation. You were the plan. You were the engine, not the extra. You weren't the backup, they just treated you like one. In truth, you were the blueprint, the original design, the reason everything stayed standing when nothing else made sense. Your presence brought purpose. Your energy brought order. Your vision brought direction into their chaos, but they couldn't see it. They were blinded by ego, convinced you were replaceable, convinced someone else could do what only you could. So they moved on quickly, loudly, and carelessly. They called you replaceable while desperately searching for a version of you that doesn't exist. And now it's hitting them. Nothing works. The new people they brought in don't connect like you, don't care like you, don't think like you. The glue is gone and everything's falling apart. Their new circle feels cold. Their plans keep failing. Their energy feels disconnected, hollow. Because what they had wasn't just about the structure, it was about the architect. And you, chosen one, were the architect. The heart, the mind, the hands that held it all together. They didn't just lose a person. They lost the blueprint, the one piece that carried a value no one else can replicate. And here's the sting they can't go back. You've elevated. You've moved forward. You've grown beyond the chapter where you had to prove your worth. You don't belong in that structure anymore. They made sure of that the moment they treated you like an option. But you were never the option. You were the only one who could make it work. Now, every failed attempt to replace you is a reminder. They didn't just lose a connection, they lost alignment. They traded the original for a copy, the masterpiece for a rough draft. And that kind of regret, it doesn't fade. It lingers. Because you weren't Plan B. You were the vision, the model, the formula. And what they never understood is this: once the blueprint walks away, the structure never stands the same again. Number 9, they were addicted to your struggle, not your strength. They didn't love you. They loved your pain. They didn't cheer for your power. They fed off your pain. It sounds harsh, but it's the truth most won't say out loud. Some people don't feel significant unless you're falling apart. Your confusion made them feel wise. Your struggles gave them a platform. Your lowest moments made them feel tall. They were never drawn to your light. They were addicted to your darkness. Every time you stumbled, they showed up not to lift you, but to watch. They disguised it as concern. They used soft words. They offered help. But that help came wrapped in judgment and laced with ego. Because as long as you were struggling, they had purpose. They got to be the fixer, the hero, the one who seemed to have it all together. They preferred you small, uncertain, and unsure. Because when you were dim, they could shine. Your vulnerability gave them a warped sense of importance. They didn't clap for your wins. They studied your wounds. They watched your life like a lab experiment, analyzing your failures, measuring your pain, calculating just how far they could push before you finally cracked. But then something changed. You stopped needing them. You stopped falling apart. You started healing not loudly, but deeply. Not dramatically, but completely. You discovered your inner compass. And suddenly, their words lost power. Their influence faded. You began to rise, quietly, steadily, stronger than ever. And with every step upward, their illusion began to unravel. Because without your brokenness, they had no identity. Without your chaos, they had no control. Now, your strength is too loud for their insecurity to handle. Your peace is too anchored for their noise to shake. You're no longer the broken bird they could rescue. You've become the eagle soaring high, unreachable, untouchable. And that, more than anything, terrifies them. They're not weeping because you hurt them. They're weeping because they lost the version of you that made them feel powerful. Because they can't fix what isn't broken. They can't control someone who's whole. Now, they're left sitting in the silence of their own emptiness. Your glow now casts light on the very shadows they tried to hide. Your independence reveals the manipulation they once masked as concern. Your healing uncovers their dysfunction. And your strength? It erased their relevance. The truth is, they were never there for you. They were only ever present for your pain. And now that you've become strong, they have nothing left to feed on. Number 10, your healing destroyed their entire act. It didn't just transform you, it shattered a performance built entirely around your brokenness. Because it was never about support. It was about control. You see, they weren't just watching you suffer. They were acting in it, playing roles, pretending, shaping their identity around your wounds as if your pain was a stage and they were born to perform. Some cast themselves as heroes, the saviors, who never gave up on you. Others played the victim, claiming they were the ones hurt by your chaos. And some cloaked themselves in wisdom, positioning your struggle as the proof of their superiority. But underneath it all, every line, every costume, every dramatic pause was built on one condition: that you stay broken. Your suffering gave them a script. Your dysfunction gave them a spotlight. As long as you needed fixing, they kept their crown. As long as you remained unstable, they kept control. You became the scapegoat, the excuse, the emotional punching bag. And they rehearsed that narrative so often, they began to believe it. But then something happened, you healed, and when you did, the entire theater collapsed. Because your growth didn't just elevate you, it exposed them. Your peace rewrote the narrative. Your clarity shattered the illusion. You stopped reacting, stopped explaining, stopped begging for understanding. You outgrew the chaos. And suddenly, their roles didn't make sense anymore. The one who played the hero now looks controlling. The self-proclaimed victim appears dramatic. The so-called advisor now sounds arrogant. Because the broken version of you they built their identity around no longer exists. And without your pain to validate their control, they're lost in confusion. No more pity to exploit. No more chaos to organize. No more gossip to spin. You closed the curtain mid-performance, and now they stand on stage with no script, just silence and shame. They never planned for this. They never imagined you'd find yourself, reclaim your identity, and rise without them. And now, in the ruins of their carefully crafted story, they grieve not your absence, but the power they lost when you finally got free. Your healing wasn't soft. It was disruptive. It didn't whisper. It roared. It didn't ask for understanding. It demanded truth. And now, they stand in the wreckage of their own deception, watching the real you thrive in a world that no longer requires their performance. Number 11, they're not crying over you. They're mourning who they'll never become. Let's be clear, those tears are not about missing you. They're not weeping because you're gone. They're weeping because your evolution has become a mirror they can't avoid. A reflection in high definition of who they could have been but never chose to become. On the surface, it might look like regret, a few quiet moments, some nostalgia, maybe even whispered what-ifs into the dark. But if you look closer, what's truly unraveling isn't love, it's an identity collapse. Because you didn't just leave. You ascended, and that ascent quietly shattered every illusion they had built about themselves. You see, they wore confidence like a costume. They mimicked depth. They performed spirituality. They posed as strong. But when you started living what they only pretended, their performance unraveled. You became the standard. Your grace under fire burned through their fade. Your calm in chaos silenced their gossip. Your rise, steady, honest, free of shortcuts, revealed a kind of spiritual strength they never had the courage to cultivate. You didn't just grow, you embodied everything they claimed to be. You remained kind where they would have turned cruel. You stood in truth where they would have compromised for image. You held your dignity when they would have begged, lied, or manipulated. And that's what haunts them, because now they see the real difference. It's not just that they lost someone great. It's that they were never as great as they pretended to be. They couldn't have walked your path. They wouldn't have survived your storms. They didn't have the soul depth, the inner compass, or the sacred grit required to endure what you did. They're not weeping over your absence. They're mourning the mask they wore while you were rising. And the moment you stopped playing small, the moment you stood fully in your power, that mask cracked. Suddenly, they had to face their reflection. And it was hollow. Everything they tried to imitate you became for real. And now, the gap between the image they faked and the life you're living is unbearable. This isn't jealousy. It's spiritual humiliation. They're not breaking because they miss you. They're breaking because standing beside you once gave them borrowed identity. And now that you're gone, they're forced to face a painful truth. You weren't just someone they knew. You were the mirror reflecting everything they pretended to be. And now that the performance has ended, they're falling apart in silence. After all of the mocking, the replacing, the gossip, the silent sabotage, what's left is not power. It's regret. Quiet, sharp, and haunting. Because while they cursed you, you healed. While they tried to replace you, you evolved. While they fed off your struggle, you became untouchable. You were always the blueprint, the foundation, the unstoppable force they never expected. Your glow didn't just endure, it revealed. Your healing didn't just set you free, it dismantled the illusion they lived in. And now, the story isn't about what they did to you. It's about what they lost when you finally rose. If this spoke to your soul, if you've made it this far, you already know this found you for a reason. Like, share, and subscribe if you're choosing peace over revenge.